the strain. Was it a bicycle? What is wrong with my brain? Is it the end of me? No, I must still believe. So I'm still alive, you see. Heck yeah, now I'm on my way. But let's stay focused, there's still a job in hand that we must do. Cameras start to click, we know what create is something new. So go Marty and Sarah and Mark and Matt, Owen, Smitty, McGrilly and Jamie Lane in the Archer County Band. The Archer County Band. The Archer County Band. The Archer County Band. Stop the clock, we're done, we're rolling. Sound the horn and sing that we are going. 27 hours, that is the time. So let's hop on the bus and let it shine, 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 shine. Say sha la 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 la, 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 sha la 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 la.
Good afternoon, folks. You are very welcome to Bandido Talks. Bandido's beef, folks. The Bandido is back with some of his beef. You know, let me tell you something, folks. I had a very interesting discussion earlier this week. I was up in Belfast. What do I normally do up in Belfast? I was playing a bit of the old tennis. I was out on court, but then I bumped into a female acquaintance when I was up in Belfast. I bumped into a lady who I've known for many years. And it turns out that this lady, who I haven't seen in quite a while, or spoken with in quite a while. You know, I don't always be up in Belfast, folks. But you know, I was up earlier this week, and I bump into this lady, this female acquaintance. And she says, you know, Mr. Bandido, I've seen you on YouTube. I've seen your little icon. You know, with the red bandana and the sunglasses. I've seen your little icon, and I went into one of your videos, and I realized it was your good self. And you know, I've watched some of your content, actually. You know, I've been looking at some of your lessons in nature, looking at some of your live shows. And you know, she said that, on the whole, she enjoyed the show. And I thought, well, marvellous. Isn't that great? But then a but came. You know the way when someone butters you up, folks? They tell you all the nice things first. Tell you how great you are. To keep you interested. To keep you engaged. The Bandido was deceived by this lady. Because she showers me with all of these compliments. About my diligence. My consistency on the platform. The broad array of topics that we cover here on the show. Then the but came. What followed that? Well, you know, she said, yeah, I've been watching some of your live shows. I do like some of the things you say. Not all of them. Not all of them. But I like some of the things you say. I don't mind your delivery. But you know, you're very critical of women. She said, you know, I watch some of your shows. I watch some of your little case studies. And you know, it always seems as if you're criticizing women. Do you ever criticize men on the show? Do you ever highlight any of the shortcomings that men have? And so she started to say to me that it looks like I have a bias. She says it looks like the Bandido has a bias. You know, very critical of the females of this world. But where's the balance? So, you know, look. I say it all the time, folks. I'm a fair man. I'm a fair man. You know, I will hear people out. I will listen to them. I will be attentive. I will not I won't discard anyone. You know, will I ultimately end up following their feedback? Probably not. Probably not. But you know, I'll give them an audience with the Bandido. I'll always give them a chance. And you know, this lady, she tells me that she feels as if the show is very unbalanced. You know, where's the balance? Men cannot be perfect creatures. Surely not. Now look, folks, when you're talking to someone in the real world, you have to be pleasant. You have to be a nice man. You know, you don't want going around pissing people off unnecessarily in the real world. So, you know, I said, look, you're probably right. You're probably right. Maybe the Bandido leans in a bit too heavy when it comes to criticizing women and females. You know, you just have to keep them happy, folks. You know, when a woman comes up to you and voices her disapproval of something that you're doing, you have to ask yourself a fundamental question. Could I be arsed with this smoke? Could I be bothered with this? Could I be bothered really trying to mount an argument on my end to try and convince this lady that she isn't exactly seeing the picture clearly? Of course not. Folks, your time and energy is too precious. So, you know, I just agreed with her and said, you know what? You're right. The Bandido, he's a harsh man. He can be a harsh man. And I made her a promise. And the Bandido never breaks his promises. And I saw it as a challenge. You know, I saw it as a challenge. I thought to myself, I'll make this gal a promise. She seems to watch the show a little. Maybe not all the time. But you know, she seems to watch it a little. So I made this promise. And I said, look, if you stay tuned to the show, I promise you that I will do a live show where I bring forth Bandido's beef to highlight some of the shortcomings that men have in this modern world. I made her that promise. I said I will do a show specifically dedicated to critiquing some of the behaviors that I have observed in my lifetime. It's just my experience, folks. It's Bandido Talks. So it's the Bandido's experience. So I made the promise and said that I will do a show based on my experience and my current knowledge of men, women, their dynamics as they interact with one another, and I will do a show highlighting one of the shortcomings that I see in men. I'm going to analyze a specific behavior. And we're going to incorporate this into Bandido's beef. So I have a beef today, folks. There's a beef that I have to air. You know, I love Bandido's beef. It allows me just to vent. I can just ramble. There's nothing that a Bandido loves to do more than ramble. And that's what we're going to do today. So I set myself a challenge. This gal wants Bandido Talks to be more balanced. So I'm going to give her some balance. And maybe when I bump into her again, let's see what her feedback is. But you know, on the show today, folks, having accepted the challenge, I am indeed going to analyze a particular aspect of male behavior with which I have a beef. There's no other way to say it. What is this aspect of male behavior with which I have a beef? Well, if you've been paying attention to the thumbnail, you will of course have seen a man and a woman holding hands. The title of the show is Men Holding Their Chick's Hand. You know, I see this a lot, folks. I see it a lot. I see dudes holding their chick's hand. You know, I'm out walking around town. I could be walking anywhere. And there's always a few of them clinging to their chick's hand. Please don't let go. Please don't let go. You know, they're literally clinging to it. You know, I actually saw something particularly interesting. I was in a shop. I was getting some food. And there was this dude coming down one of the aisles with his woman. And what initially happened was, God forbid, they parted company for a few seconds. You know, his woman had to go pick something off the shelf. So he had to resign himself to the fact that for a few seconds, he wasn't going to be able to cling to his chick's hand. So there's a parting here. They're no longer holding hands. So she goes and picks up whatever she needs to pick up off the shelf. And then as soon as she gets back into his orbit, you wouldn't believe it, folks. I was a few yards up the aisle and I was staring at this because this has been an idea in my head just for a few days since talking with this gal up in Belfast. And you know, I was in the shop and so I'm looking at this dude holding this chick's hands or holding her hand, and then they part ways for a few seconds. As soon as she comes back into his orbit again, I wish you had have seen what I witnessed. Are you trying to catch a fish, sir? I mean, what am I watching? I mean, as soon as she's within arm's reach of this dude, he's like fucking grabbing at her. Give me your hand. And initially, she's sort of balancing this item that she's just picked up. And she's kind of like, yeah, great. And he's like, crushing her hand. And I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, you know what? My female acquaintance up in Belfast, she has a point. I have to stand corrected. You know, initially in the moment, I was just agreeing with her because, you know, I couldn't be arsed. You know, mounting a defense for Bandido Talks. What's the point in that? But then I see this final piece of conclusive evidence and I thought, you know what? My female acquaintance has a point. There is something that we need to talk about here with regards to men. And by fuck, is it a big shortcoming that I personally see in men's behavior? Holding hands. This dude in the shop. We're going to talk all about this, folks. We're going to talk all about men who hold their chick's hand. In public. May I add. In public. And what we're going to do, folks, we're going to break this show up into two parts. We're going to break this Bandido's beef up into two parts. Part number one is going to be, we're going to analyze who the man is signaling to. That's the first thing. So when you see a man holding his chick's hand in public, we're first going to analyze who is he signaling to. is he actually signaling anything to his chick, or is he signaling to someone else? That's the first thing we're going to talk about here. Then the second thing we're going to talk about is how his chick is likely to be interpreting this signal. Very important. Part 2 is going to be extremely important because I see dudes doing this and they seem to be under the illusion that this is a great idea to, hold their chick's hand in public and display whatever the fuck it is they think they are displaying. When in reality, it's funny, they think they are signaling one thing because they are distorted, when in reality, I would argue, they are actually signaling something that's very undesirable from the perspective of, you guessed it, their chick. So here you have all these dudes holding their chick's hand, thinking that it's the right thing to do, when in reality, I'm going to make an argument that they are actually signaling a very undesirable trait that their woman is absolutely aware of, and it's a fucking turn off. They are literally shooting themselves in the bollocks, these dudes. Most of them. Now look. Before we continue, before we really get into the show, before we get into this first part, let me just clarify something, folks, because I know there will be any dudes out here who may end up watching this. You know those sensitive souls? You know the men who are really in touch with their emotions? They are delicate sorts. Emotionally unstable. These men who are very easily triggered. I'm going to speak to you just for a few minutes here, if you've made it this far. So if you're the type of man watching this show, and you're a very emotional sort, you're very easily triggered, you're in touch with your emotions, in touch with your feelings, delicate, very sensitive to people's comments and feedback, let me just make you aware of something here. I am going to talk in a very generalized fashion, okay? I'm going to talk in a very generalized fashion. So please realize that there are always exceptions to the rule. And I'm sure that you who's watching this, who holds your chick's hand, I'm sure you're the exception. So don't worry, don't panic. If you're listening to this show and you can feel that you're starting to get triggered, you're starting to think, that fucking cunt, that bandana clad, that idiot that I was watching on the live stream, him, he knows nothing, and you start to get really angry. Just remember, there are always exceptions to any rule, folks. And whenever one speaks in a very generalized fashion, certain nuance is lost. And whenever I'm speaking in a very generalized fashion, I can't, the show would go on for far too long if I had to consider every exception to what it is that I'm going to say. So look, just be content with the fact that I'm sure you watching this, you who loves to hold your chick's hand, I'm sure you're the exception to everything that I'm going to say. So you've nothing to worry about. You can kick back, you can watch the show, you can be entertained, you can have a laugh, and then you can go out for a walk with your chick and hold her hand. And you can take solace, you can take comfort in the fact that everything that I'm going to say doesn't apply to you, okay? Because, if you're feeling very triggered by the show, I wouldn't want to have to get into contact with some of my therapist friends, some of my psychologist friends, because if you need, just drop me a comment below. I can send you all the relevant information. If you're really triggered by what it is that I'm going to say, I can get you set up for a psychotherapy session with one of my friends. And they can walk you through and you can process your emotional turmoil, all this emotional turmoil that you're going to feel throughout this episode. So just remember, number one, I'm sure that you're an exception to the rule. You're going to be an exception to everything I'm going to say. You, who holds your chick's hand, You're going to be the exception. That's number one. And then number two, if you are feeling really triggered, just let me know down in the comments below. And I can set you up. I can set you up with a psychotherapy session. You can process it all with the therapist. I'm just looking out for your best interests, of course. Okay, so, seriously though, folks, I am going to speak in a very generalized fashion here. So look, whenever you come on and you do a show, I don't want to be doing a show for 4 fucking hours. I really don't. I do try to keep these shows to 60 minutes, an hour and a half. Sometimes I drift into the 2-hour territory, but I try to keep them to 60 to 90 minutes. I can't consider every exception to what I'm going to say. So I'm just going to speak generally. So don't panic. Nobody's attacking you. It's just the Bandido off ranting on Bandido's beef. Okay, so let's get into this first part of the show. The first part is what? So we have these dudes that are holding their chick's hand. And folks, as we've talked about before on the show, everybody in this world is sending signals. Everyone. Every single person that goes out into public, anybody who talks with someone, anyone who's doing business with someone, anyone who's in a friendship, anyone who's in a romance, it doesn't matter, folks. Everybody on the planet is sending signals. And not only are they sending signals, but they are receiving signals from others. This is very important. When we send signals, what are we doing? We are trying to communicate something to another person. When we are receiving signals, what are we doing? We are taking feedback from other people. This is an unavoidable part of life, folks. Your mere presence on planet Earth means that you are sending signals. Now, I'm going to get a whole bunch of people that'll say, I don't send signals. That's not what I do. No, I'm not. I don't send signals. All right. So you're just going to buck the trend for all of humanity. Of course you send signals. If you talk to people, if you post stuff online, if you like stuff online, if you walk out into public and you dress a certain way, if you are seen entering a certain restaurant, folks, everything you do in this life, you are sending a signal out into the universe. And when you send a signal out into the universe, either by what you say, who you associate with, who you do business with, what restaurant you go to, what clothes you wear, it doesn't matter. I could go on and on giving examples. You are always going to be sending signals out into the universe. By just being alive. By just being alive, you are sending a signal. And even if you don't go out into public, let's say you lock yourself in a room, you're still sending a signal. Because the people that know you, the people who are aware of your presence in this world, will then be thinking, why have I not seen Tommy out and around town? So your absence is even a signal. You can't avoid it. And so if we accept this notion that we are always sending signals through what we say, what we wear, where we go, who we associate with, etc., if we are always sending signals out into the universe, then that means people are going to receive these signals. Because remember, folks, we not only emit signals, we also receive signals. So if you are emitting signals, which are unavoidable, then there will be other people on the receiving end of your signal who will be putting that signal through their subjective worldview and interpreting your signal in a certain way. Right now, if you're watching this show, you are watching me with a red bandana on, with black aviator sunglasses, a silver chain, and no top on. I'm sending a signal. What do you think? Do you think I just came on to the show today? And I was just an unaware dipshit and thought, I'll just go on and I'll just do my show today. No! I am giving a certain image out into the online space. Some people are going to really dislike the image. Some people are going to really dislike the delivery. Some people are going to like it. But the point is, I am absolutely aware, by wearing what I'm wearing, or in this case, the lack of clothing, I know that I'm sending a signal. A signal is being sent. And I know there will be people, potentially, on the other end of this show, on the other end of this screen, who will be taking my signal through what I'm saying, what I'm wearing, how I'm presenting myself. People will take that signal and filter it through their own lens of the world. They may interpret the signal accurately, they may misinterpret the signal. There's always potential for that too. Okay, so this concept of sending signals, folks, is unavoidable. You are constantly sending signals out into the universe and you are constantly receiving signals from the universe. We call this idea of receiving signals, let me put that another way, that's called feedback. When you receive a signal, that's feedback. Feedback from your environment. Okay, now, the first part of this show is understanding. Whenever you see a dude, or perhaps you are a dude who holds your chick's hand, you need to first and foremost realize that you are sending a signal out into the universe. We call it a public display of affection. What is it though? When we strip it back, it's a signal. So anyone who holds their chick's hand, we can absolutely 100% know that they are sending a signal out into the universe. And the first part of this show, what we are going to try and figure out is who are these dudes signaling to? Because we've got two options. They are either signaling to their chick or they are signaling to the onlooking public. It's one of two options. They are either signaling to their chick or they are signaling to the onlooking public, or we could say a third option, they are signaling to both. So those are your three options. It's either an exclusive signal to the onlooking public, an exclusive signal to the chick herself, or a signal to both. Okay, now, here's the thing. Here's the beginning of my beef with all of this. You see these dudes that hold their chick's hand in public? You know who they are signaling towards. And I'm just going to speak from my own perspective, my own experience. The vast majority of cases, in the vast majority of cases, do you know who they are consciously signaling towards? And I want you to memory hold that, consciously. Because we're going to get on to unconscious signaling in a few minutes. These dudes, they are consciously signaling, I would argue, not to their chick. They are consciously signaling to the onlooking public. So that's the first thing that we want to understand here. In the vast majority of cases, when you have some dude holding his chick's hand, he is not signaling to the chick. He's not doing that. He is signaling to the onlooking public. Now, what is he looking to signal to the onlooking public? Well, it's very obvious, folks. He wants to signal that he has been able to get a girlfriend. He wants to signal, he wants everyone to know that he has managed to bag this chick. Now, why would he be doing this? Why would he not be signaling to his chick? Why would he be signaling to the onlooking public? Well, let's actually get into this. Why would a dude be consciously signaling to the onlooking public? Why does a dude want everybody to know that he has a girlfriend? Because let me tell you something, in my experience, you see, whenever you have a man and woman in a romantic relationship and both parties fully qualify for this romantic relationship and both parties feel as though they are getting their fair share out of the romantic interaction, you see, people who are in those circumstances, they don't hold hands in public. Surprise, surprise. So when you have a man who fully qualifies for his woman and a woman who fully qualifies for her man, you don't tend to see men who fully qualify and who are comfortable and confident in their relationship holding hands with their chick in public. The reason why you don't see this is because they do not need to signal to the onlooking public that they have a girlfriend, because they already have the respect and admiration and mutual interest with the girlfriend in maintaining this relationship. In other words, he has no incentive to have to signal anything to anyone. He is completely at ease with the relationship. In other words, he is secure within the relationship. He feels security. He feels like he is bringing something valuable to the table, which is appreciated and respected and admired by his woman. And likewise, his woman is also bringing something to the table that he greatly respects and admires also. When you get two people who are in a very compatible relationship like this, they no longer feel the urge to try and convince other people that they are in a relationship, because that is exactly what dudes who hold their chick's hand are trying to signal. They are trying to convince the onlooking public that they have a girlfriend, that they are in a relationship. Why would someone try to convince the onlooking public of such a thing? Well, let's get into this. This is interesting. When you hold your chick's hand, if you're a dude and you hold your chick's hand, what is actually happening is you're trying to convince the onlooking public that you have a girlfriend. Why? Why would you be trying to do this? This desire, folks, to convince people that you are in a relationship stems from a place of neediness and desperation. That's why I put in the thumbnail, public display of desperation. Dudes who hold their chick's hand are literally broadcasting that they are desperate and needy to convince everyone who is watching them holding hands that they have an established relationship. Now, what does this neediness and desperation to convince others tell us about the man who is holding hands with his chick? It tells us that he is insecure in the relationship. That is what it tells us more often than not. That dude that I told you in our little introduction, who was in the shop, who was like trying to desperately clasp his chick's hand. Desperate. That is what, I literally looked him up and down. And I looked his chick up and down. And you know what? Desperate. Needy. Insecure. The desperation, folks, and the neediness is a signal. It is a symptom of insecurity. Because you see, if you are secure in a relationship, you don't feel neediness or desperation to convince other people that you're in a relationship. Because you and your woman already share mutual respect, admiration, and interest for one another. You don't need to signal anything else to anyone because you already have the chick on board. Your woman is on board with you. You are on board with your woman. You are both compatible. You both qualify for one another. And so as a result, when you know that you fully qualify for someone and that they qualify for you from their perspective, everyone feels secure in the relationship. And when you feel secure in a relationship, you are no longer needy and desperate to try and convince others of the true status of your relationship. Now, this is very important to realize because when you are needy and desperate, you are insecure. There's no other way to interpret this. Because if you're feeling the need to convince others, if you can't just let the relationship speak for itself, because that's what happens when you have people who are secure, when they actually feel like they qualify for one another. They let the relationship speak for itself. They don't need to try and force someone into believing that their relationship is built on solid foundations. No. The relationship speaks for itself. The interaction speaks for itself. The compatibility speaks for itself. You don't have to speak on behalf of the relationship by holding hands with the chick. The relationship does all the talking for you. But for a relationship, folks, for a romantic relationship to do the talking for you, both parties and you as a man, you need to be secure in the relationship. You can't be insecure, because your insecurities in a relationship will always lead to neediness and desperation to try and convince others that you're actually in a solid relationship, that your relationship is on sturdy foundations. Okay. Now, where does the insecurity come from is the next question. So you may have listened so far and you may be thinking, okay, the logic checks out so far, but where does the insecurity come from? Very simple, folks. The insecurity comes from the fact that the man knows that he doesn't qualify for his chick. That is where it tends to come from. The man knows that he isn't fully qualifying for his chick. That's the first place that this desperation and neediness can come from. He knows that his chick is bringing a greater portion of value to the relationship than he is bringing. And as a result, he feels uncomfortable. He feels uncomfortable because he knows that there's probably a whole bunch of other dudes out there who are more physically attractive than him and who bring more resources to the table, more status to the table than him. And he knows that at any stage, his woman could get poached. He knows his woman could get poached. And so one of the primary reasons that you see insecurity from a man in a relationship, and a symptom of insecurity is fucking holding hands with your chick in public. One of the primary reasons why you see this is because the man knows that he isn't qualifying. He is getting signals from his chick that he isn't qualifying. And he is desperate to convince everyone that he does qualify when in reality he isn't. And sooner or later, he's going to get the heave-ho. Now, another reason why a man can feel insecure in a relationship is because he has tried to get into relationships before. He has tried to establish a romantic interaction before, and he keeps getting dumped. And the sheer thought of living without a chick hanging off his arm is extremely uncomfortable. And it makes him desperate to basically just have anyone to hold hands with. Anyone will do. Because the alternative is walking around on your own. The alternative is the onlooking public viewing you without a woman. And for some dudes, it is painful psychologically. It is the height of psychological pain, the pinnacle of psychological pain, we could say, for a dude to have to go to a wedding on his own, for a dude to have to go to some fucking celebration on his own, to some birthday party, for some dude to have to walk around on his own. And there are a whole bunch of men who cannot stomach the notion of having to go out into public without broadcasting the fact that they are in a relationship. But this makes them needy and desperate, and it makes them insecure in the relationship. So they are constantly giving off symptoms of insecurity because they do not want to stir the alternative in the face, which is walking around single. So, those are the two places from which the insecurity comes from, in my experience. That's what I've noticed. You've either got men who don't qualify for the chick. The chick is far more physically attractive, or at least significantly or considerably more physically attractive than him. And he knows this. He knows that there are other dudes out there that could poach his chick. And so what does he do? When he goes out into public, he puts the fucking clamp on. Hold my hand! Hold my hand! Please hold my hand! I need to broadcast that I'm in a relationship with you. Otherwise, you're going to get poached. Futile exercise. It's a waste of time. A complete waste of time. Because, as we're going to talk about in part 2, I'm just going to hold off on that, but in part 2, we're going to realize why you sending that signal to your chick is a total turn-off for your chick. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. But that's the first reason. The first reason why a man's going to have insecurity is because he knows that he doesn't qualify. He knows that his chick is bringing more mate value to the relationship than he is. In other words, he knows that he is being over-rewarded. He knows that he is getting a disproportionately large amount of benefit out of this relationship compared to the chick. He isn't as physically attractive. He isn't bringing as many resources as some other dude could bring, so he's getting over-rewarded. And he knows that he doesn't fully qualify. He knows that he's being over-rewarded, and this feeling of being over-rewarded leads to insecurity. It leads to anxiety, because at any moment, some other dude who's more attractive than him, both physically and in terms of their capacity to acquire resources and status, that dude could come along at any moment and fucking steal his woman, poach his woman. And so, you see this manifestation of neediness and desperation through the act of holding hands. That's the first reason why a man will be insecure. The second reason, as I've explained, is because the man cannot bear to be walking around in public single. Because in his brain, the way his psychology is wired, he doesn't want people to be viewing him as constantly single. Because what happens, folks, if you get the reputation for being constantly single as a man, you know the inference that people start to draw? People start to think you're gay. And most men, if they are truly heterosexual and they are straight, they do not want the onlooking public making the inference that they are gay. This is why a shit ton of men will get into relationships with fucking ugly ones and twos. Like sometimes I'll look down the street and I'll see a dude who's about a 5 out of 10, average. In terms of his physical attractiveness, he's about a 5 out of 10. And he's walking with some gal who's like a fucking 1 or 2, morbidly obese, fucking horrible skin, flab everywhere, disgusting. And I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, holy fuck, this dude could do much better than this chick. So the question is, why does he not do much better than this chick? Well, it's for the exact reason that I'm saying. He would much rather be in a relationship with a fucking ugly 1 or 2, but at least he's in a relationship with something that we would fucking broadly determine as a woman. Mind you, it's hard to tell sometimes. But you know, that man would much rather be seen to be in a relationship with an ugly woman than to be not seen in a relationship at all. Because whenever you're a man, if you aren't being visibly seen in public to be walking around with a chick, people will start to make the inference that you're gay. And most men, if they are truly heterosexual, do not want they don't want the rumor mill to start getting up and going. And they don't want people to start whispering that old Johnny there, you know, he's a bit quisted, as one of my relations would say. Not twisted, quisted. Nobody wants to be called quisted. Nobody wants to be seen as, you know, what was it another friend of mine said recently? I can't remember, an arse bandit or something like that. There was some phrase. It made me laugh. You know, nobody wants to be seen as an arse bandit. And so as a result, you will get a whole bunch of insecure, needy, desperate men holding hands with a really ugly gal who's a 1 or 2 out of 10 and morbidly obese. And they will be clinging to her, broadcasting to the onlooking public. Look, I'm not gay. Look, please understand, folks, I'm not gay. Look, I'm holding hands with a woman. I know she's a minger. I know she's a complete and utter minger, but she's at least a woman. I'm not gay. Please don't make the inference that I'm gay. So, those are the two reasons why a man is insecure in a relationship. Okay, so that's part one, folks, of understanding who the man is signaling to when he holds hands with his chick. I would make the argument that in the vast majority of cases, men who hold their chick's hand are insecure, needy, and desperate. And they are signaling not to the chick, they are signaling to the onlooking public for the two reasons that I've just explained. Okay, now, and just to add on that, before we just move on to part two, just to reiterate, folks, you see, if you've got a man and a woman who fully qualify, they both qualify physically, and the man qualifies in terms of his status and his resource acquisition. If you've got a man and a woman, one here, and they come together, and they are completely compatible, and they fully qualify with one another, and they are both bringing their fair share of value to the relationship. In other words, nobody feels as though they are getting screwed in the romantic interaction. So both parties feel as if they are holding up their end of the bargain. When you've got a man and a woman who are holding up their end of the bargain and they are bringing their own substantial portion of value to the relationship, you don't see them fucking holding hands in public, trying to desperately convince people that they are in a relationship. Because if you are in a relationship like that, where both parties are compatible and both parties fully qualify for one another, the relationship speaks for itself. You don't have to sell the relationship to anyone. It's very obvious, folks. We have evolved to be able to pick up these signals. What did I say at the start of the show? You can tell more often than not if someone is in a relationship where both parties qualify and both parties are completely secure in the relationship. In other words, the relationship speaks for itself. So they don't need to signal to the onlooking public by holding fucking hands. Okay, so that's part one. Now, let's move on to part two. Because this is where it gets really interesting. And I find it fucking hilarious, actually. So part two. How is the dude's chick interpreting his signal of desperation, neediness, and insecurity? Because we've now established, folks, that when you hold hands with your chick, you are broadcasting your insecurity. Now, the dudes who do this, because they're dipshits, don't realize that they're doing this. They think this is a great idea. In their little brains, they are thinking, great, if I can just be seen holding hands, I can sell and convince everyone that I'm in a really solid relationship. Yeah. That's what the dipshit is thinking. But what the dipshit doesn't realize is that while he thinks he is signaling to the onlooking public, he's actually sending a signal to his chick. And not only is he sending a signal to his chick, but he's sending a very undesirable signal to his chick. Folks, let me tell you something. What did I say at the start of the show? We as humans, not only do we emit signals out into the universe, but we also receive signals. We do both. And you see, if you are hell-bent on fucking clasping to the hand, clasping your chick's hand in public, in my experience, what you are doing is you are sending a very strong signal that you don't qualify for the relationship. You are sending a very strong signal that you are being over-rewarded in the relationship. You are sending a very strong signal that you are not bringing as much value to this relationship than your chick is. You are sending a very strong signal that you are needy, desperate, and insecure. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, folks, because when your chick picks up these signals, which she will, unless she is fucking deaf, dumb, and fucking blind, she will pick up these signals. She will pick up your signal of being over-rewarded in the relationship. She will pick up your signal that you don't qualify for the relationship. She will pick up your signal that you are extracting more out of this relationship than she is. Because you are the less physically attractive party and because you bring less mate value to the relationship, you are getting more out of the relationship than her. She will pick this up. And she will also pick up that you're needy, you're desperate, and you're insecure. That's why you're fucking clasping her hand in the first place. Now, what happens when your woman starts to pick up these signals? Because, folks, this is the really interesting thing. What did I say to you earlier? I said that men who hold their chick's hand will send a conscious signal to the onlooking public. Remember I told you to memory hold that. Because now we're going to talk about unconscious signals. The man is sending a conscious signal to the onlooking public. The conscious signal being, whoa, look at me, I'm in a relationship, I'm not gay, basically. That's the conscious signal that he wants to send out to the onlooking public. But you know what the dipshit doesn't realize? He is sending a fuck ton of unconscious signals to his chick. And he doesn't even realize it. And then he wonders why in 2 weeks he gets fucking dumped. What are the unconscious signals that he's sending to his chick? Everything that I've just said. Not qualifying for the relationship. He's not physically attractive enough and he's not bringing enough resources and status to the table. Unconscious signal number 1. Unconscious signal number 2 that he's sending to his chick. He's being over-rewarded in the relationship. Meaning that he is extracting more from the relationship than his chick is. In other words, he's screwing his chick over. He's getting a disproportionate amount of value by being associated with a more sexually attractive female. Unconscious signal number 3, he's bringing less value to the romantic relationship than his chick. Unconscious signal number 4, he's needy. Unconscious signal number 5, he's desperate. Unconscious signal number 6, he's insecure. Folks, these are all unconscious signals that you are sending to your chick when you cannot resist the urge to hold her hand in public. Now, the next question is, how does your chick interpret these signals? Because the woman is as much a receiver of signals as she is an emitter of signals. So you can be sure as fuck that she's going to be receiving and taking all of these inputs into her brain and analysing all of this. So what does her analysis look like? Let's try and figure out what the analysis looks like, folks. If you are a chick whose hand is being held by some dude who doesn't qualify, isn't as physically attractive as you, doesn't bring as much mate value to the romance, is being over-rewarded, is actually exploiting you and extracting more from the relationship than you are, he's needy, desperate, and insecure. If you are getting all of those unconscious signals, do you know what the chick's gonna think? You know what she's gonna think? When you give all of this feedback to a chick, she's going to think, I can do better than this dude. This dude is exploiting me. He's extracting more benefit from the romance than I am. I'm the one who's bringing most of the mate value. I'm the one who's actually getting under-rewarded because he isn't as fancy as me. When you start sending your chick signals like that, you are sending an extremely undesirable signal, because what this feedback is going to allow your chick to do is it's going to allow her to recalibrate. Remember we talked about in our last live show, folks, with Avatar Aang and Katara from Avatar The Last Airbender. Everybody, folks, in the sexual marketplace, in the romantic marketplace, everyone is constantly calibrating themselves. If we imagine a rough scale of 1 to 10, 1 being extremely unattractive and 10 being super, the pinnacle of attractiveness, the pinnacle of mate value. If we imagine this scale, everyone is constantly, folks, trying to calibrate where they sit. Are they a 5? Are they a 6? Are they a 9? Are they a 2? How is it, folks, that you calibrate yourself? How is it that you calibrate yourself? You get feedback from the market. The market tells you where you sit on the scale of overall mate value and attractiveness. Because remember, folks, back in the day, 50,000, 100,000 years ago, your ancestors didn't have phones. They didn't have mirrors. They couldn't see themselves. Now, I know you might say, oh, well, they could look into a body of water. Fuck me, folks. Have you ever tried, analysing your physical appearance by staring into a body of water? You can vaguely see it, but it doesn't give you the crisp detail that a picture gives you from a phone or that a mirror gives you when you look at your reflection. Folks, your ancestors, most of the time, didn't have a fucking clue what they looked like. They couldn't take a picture of themselves. They couldn't look in a mirror. And when they did look into a body of water, it was very hazy and inconclusive. So the question now is, folks, how did your ancestors know where to place themselves on this scale of mate value and attractiveness? The reason why your ancestors were able to assess if they were a 2, a 6, or a fucking 10 is by the feedback they were getting from other people. It's through the feedback from other people that you're able to calibrate yourself. If you can't see yourself, because you don't have a phone and you don't have a mirror, but you can see the type of person that's interested in you, then that acts as a reflection for your own attractiveness. If you are constantly getting hit on by 9s and 10s, let's say you're a dude, if you're constantly getting hit on by 9 out of 10 women and 10 out of 10 women, then that acts as a reflection for your own physical attractiveness and overall mate value. That's how your ancestors did it. They used the market, they used other people as a reflection of their own attractiveness. In other words, they used signals from other people. Physical attractiveness signals, and then also signals in their words and elsewhere. They used feedback. Feedback is nothing other than environmental signals that are being transmitted your way and being received by your senses and interpreted by your brain. So folks, if you are sending your chick a signal of neediness, desperation, insecurity, being over-rewarded, extracting more from the relationship than she is, and not qualifying, how the fuck do you think your chick is going to interpret those signals? What do you think is going to happen when your chick re-engages with the process of calibrating herself? Let me tell you what's going to happen. Your chick, when you give those signals, those inputs, when you funnel them the direction of your chick by fucking holding her hand in public, like a needy, desperate, insecure schlub, your chick is going to recalibrate. And you see, once she engages in this recalibration analysis, you know what the conclusive results are going to be? I can do better than this dude. This dude is extracting more from this relationship than me. And I'm getting feedback from other people in the marketplace who are more fucking attractive than this dude. I think I can do better. Because when you start as a chick, when you start to get signals that your man is needy, desperate, and insecure, those signals are telling you as a chick, they are telling you that you can do better. Because if your man was secure in the relationship, if your man was actually content, if your man was allowing the relationship to speak for itself, that would be a very different signal. That would be a signal of, this guy, I must fully qualify for this guy, and he must fully qualify for me. Because, I'm not getting any evidence that he's needy and that he's extracting more from this relationship than I am. So as a result, there's a feeling of contentment. There's a feeling of satisfaction from the chick's perspective, because she's getting signals that her man isn't needy, isn't insecure. It is the signal of insecurity, folks, that waves a big red flag for your chick. Because it's the signal of insecurity that tells your chick that she can do better than you. Otherwise, you wouldn't be needy, desperate, and insecure. And so what does your chick do? That's right. She dumps you. You get dumped. All because you were holding her hand. And you were being too needy. You were broadcasting your insecurity. And worst of all, you didn't even realize that that's what you were doing. You didn't even realize that you were broadcasting that signal. And you didn't realize that signal was being received by your own chick. And then you're wondering why you get dumped. Folks, men who hold their woman's hand, more often than not, again, if you're feeling very triggered by this show, then please get down into the comments, drop me your email address, and I'll send you on details for a therapy session that I can give, or that I can provide details on with some therapist, with some, psychiatrist, perhaps, with some psychologist to help you process the emotional turmoil that you're now feeling. I'm speaking from my own perspective. Let me finish the show with a personal anecdote. You can't beat a personal anecdote. Hold on a second, I need to drink some water. Folks, it's still like 23 degrees here in Ireland. And I'm inside in my little studio. I've got all the windows closed. Now you may say, why do you close the windows? Because I like to feel the intensity of the heat. The heat makes me perform better. Whenever I feel really warm, I feel like my engine is actually running at its optimal pace. You'll never hear me complain about it being too warm. I love the heat. But the only thing is, I do sweat a shit ton. I am sweating like fuck. I am totally saturated. If I had my tank top on now, it would be a mess. So I need a drink of water. Excuse me, folks. It is my show. And when you have your own show, you can make the rules of your own show. Such as taking a little break at the hour and 6 minute mark to have a sup of water. Could life be any better, folks? Could life be any better? The Bandido, you can see the sun even coming out behind me. So, now that the Bandido's whistle has been wetted, we're ready to conclude this show with a personal anecdote. What is the personal anecdote? Folks, I'm going to bring you back to a 14-year-old Bandido. Remember, I'm 31 now. I'm an experienced man. Seen the world. I have a much better understanding with regards to how the world functions now than what I did at 14. So let me bring you back to the 14-year-old Bandido, more inexperienced and less knowledgeable than what he is now. Let me paint the scene for you. Folks, I normally never go out to fucking nightclubs or discos. I think I've went out to a nightclub precisely twice in my life. And one of those occasions was when I was a 14-year-old. I thought to myself, look, I haven't actually been. So all these people were telling me, oh, you're going to really enjoy it. And I used to always say, no, I don't drink. I've no interest in drinking. I've no interest in being around a whole bunch of drunken people. So I don't want to go. It's really late at night, you know, and I have to put up with a whole bunch of fucking drunken garbage talk. But I got convinced, and the reason I got convinced was because a couple of the people I was going with, they didn't drink. So I thought to myself, you know, I'm 14 years of age. I've never been to a nightclub before. Everybody else has been to a nightclub. I've never ran the experiment. Maybe I'll like it. Who knows? So I thought to myself, I have a few friends here who won't be drinking, so if everything goes to shit, at least I can talk to them. At least they'll have their wits about them. So off I go. I get onto the bus, fucking crammed into a bus like a sardine in a can. Not a great first impression. But anyway, I get into this bus, off I go to this nightclub in Cookstown. I can't remember what the name of it was. What was the name of it? In Cookstown here in Northern Ireland. What the fuck was the name of the nightclub? I can't remember. It's totally escaped me. But it was a nightclub in Cookstown. So here I go, the 14-year-old Bandido, going to this nightclub. I get off the bus, sweaty as fuck. Jesus Christ, there were a lot of people on the bus. I remember that. So anyway, in the lead up to this night out, there was this sort of chemistry between me and this other gal. This other gal, I think she was a year younger than me. She was 13, I was 14. So anyway, both of us are on the bus, both of us are heading to this nightclub, and you know, romance is in the air. You know, the Bandido has never been, at this stage, 14 years of age, I had never been in what you would call a long-term relationship. Never. You know, I'd smooched a few gals, that was it. I'd never been in an actual relationship before at 14. So here I am on this bus, going to this nightclub. There's this gal on the bus who I find attractive. I think she found me attractive. There was mutual chemistry. There was a romantic vibe in the air. You know, we'd been talking to one another in the lead up to this night out, and I suppose this night out was going to be the culmination. You know, this is where the romantic sparks were going to fly. The Bandido had set the groundwork. There had been a whole bunch of interaction. And now this was the night. So anyway, off goes the Bandido. He gets off the bus and he gets into the nightclub. Now, of course, the Bandido's friends are there, and the Bandido's friends are aware of the fact that there's this romantic chemistry between the Bandido and this chick. Okay. So what happens? We get into the nightclub. Fuck me, it's loud. Jesus Christ, it was loud. I couldn't hear fucking nothing in the nightclub. People were coming up to me going, shouting into my ear. I couldn't hear anything. And I'd be looking at them going, what the fuck are you saying? I can't hear anything. So anyway, we find sort of a spot out the back. And some of my friends say, you know, such and such, I'm not going to name the person, but such and such is in the nightclub now, and, you know, do you want to go down onto the dance floor? I look out at the dance floor, and I see all the fucking hell. It's like the bus. Sardines in a can. You know, I'm looking at the dance floor. There's barely room to move. And they're all like, do you want to go down to the dance floor? Such and such is down on the dance floor. She's waiting for you down there, you know. That's where it's all going to kick off. So I'm thinking, okay, I can barely hear anything. There's a whole bunch of drunk people around me. People are fucking throwing their arms everywhere. There's barely space to move. Okay. I thought I'll embrace the experience. Run the experiment fairly. So down I go onto the dance floor. And lo and behold, who's waiting for the Bandido down there? The gal in question. Okay. So we're both on the dance floor. People keep sort of, you know, interrupting our little get-together. Every time I go to move in, you know, fucking someone dances across. And I'm thinking, why could I not just meet up with this chick, you know, at 6 o'clock in the evening? Why do I have to be in a nightclub at fucking 10:30 at night, you know, really loud music, a whole bunch of drunk people around, no space to move, I can't hear anybody. Why could I not just meet up with her and talk to her somewhere else? But here I am. I'm on the fucking dance floor. And I've got all these buffoons interrupting my moment to shine. So look, I find her attractive. I think she finds me attractive. So finally, we come together. The moment has come for the Bandido. Now remember, I know you might be thinking, 14 years of age and you still haven't been in any sort of a relationship. That is true. So whenever I, get together with this gal on the dance floor, I'm sort of thinking to myself, is this going to be like a long-term relationship? Am I going to have to, spend the whole night with this gal? Am I going to have to foster all of this romantic chemistry? I've never been in a long-term relationship. So naturally, I wasn't exactly at my most confident. And, I was getting vibes from the gal on the other end that she was interested in something more than just a little smooch and a little fling. Maybe I was misinterpreting those signals, but that's the vibe I got at the time. I could be wrong. So anyway, all this stuff is going through my head while I'm on the dance floor. So I get together with her and I haven't a clue what I'm doing. Haven't a clue. I would actually love to chat with the gal in question. I'd love to just sit down now. She must be 30. I'd be 31. I'd love to sit down and just chat with her and see what she actually thought about my performance. Fuck me. Jesus Christ. I had no idea what I was doing. I was in an environment that was totally foreign to me. Loud music. I could see a whole bunch of people staring at me. So there was all this sort of anticipatory feelings and sentiment in the air. People were expecting me, to pull it out of the bag and perform like a pro. So anyway, we get together and I do my best. Now, if I have to be honest, folks, I think, while I may have given my best, I think it was a lousy performance. I really think. That's why I'd love to sit down with the gal in question. I think it was a lousy performance from me. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know really where to hold her because, people kept bumping into us. I was like, should I hold her here? Should I swivel her around over this direction? Should I take her off the dance floor? It was just, I didn't know what I was doing. Totally out of my depth. Even from an environmental standpoint. So look, I do my best, but I think I deliver a lousy performance on the dance floor. I have to be honest. And you know the way of that awkwardness, folks. That awkwardness whenever you're young and you don't really have any experience, you don't really know what you should do whenever you come face to face with someone that you actually fancy. And the way you initially kiss someone. And then there's that period after the kiss where, you both pull away. And it's like, all right, so how was it? How did I do? There's that sense of, was it good? Did I do well? Were you happy with the service that I provided? You're trying to figure all this out on the spot. That was me. So, we have our little smooch, and then I pull away. And I'm thinking, the first thing I'm thinking is, if I say something, she's not going to be able to hear me because it's too loud. So I sort of try to lean in to say something into her ear, but she thinks I'm leaning in for another kiss. So it's like this really awkward. I'm going towards her ear to say something towards her, or to say something into her ear, and then she's sort of trying to angle her mouth at my mouth, and I'm sort of like, and then I sort of get caught in no man's land. And so I think, fuck, I have to roll with this. I may as well just smooch her again. I did my best, folks. I did my best. I offered the best service that I could offer in the moment. So then I have another little smooch, and I'm getting to the point of this story now, but I need to lay the groundwork. So I go to lean in to talk to her. She thinks I want to smooch her again, so I have to roll with it. So here we are again. I'm smooching away on the dance floor, and I can feel people sort of clapping me on the back and going, "Go on, get stuck in there." I could actually feel someone moving my hand. I must not have had my hand in the right position. Someone was moving my hand from behind. Jesus. The joys of youth. So anyway, after the second smooch, I decided, okay, I need to get off this dance floor. I need to get off the dance floor. I have to do it. Because I'm going to accomplish nothing here. I'm running out of ideas, and I don't want to be left standing here like a buffoon, like a dipshit. So I made the decision, okay, I'm now going to leave the dance floor, I'm going to go up the stairs, I'm going to go to the second floor, and we're going to go out the back, away from all the loud music, so I can actually get a grip on this thing. Now, how's this related to the show? Well, as I was leaving the dance floor, what I did, and this is the only time in my life, folks, the only time in my life that I have ever done what I'm going to explain to you. So as I was leaving the dance floor, I took her hand, and we held hands. And so we made our way off the dance floor, and once we got to the edge of the dance floor, I had a decision to make. It's like, do I let go of her hand, and do I just signal that we go up the stairs and sort of direct her out the back, or do I continue to hold hands? The Bandido was inexperienced, folks. It's going from bad to worse, from my perspective. So I decided, for the first and only time in my life, to hold hands with a chick in public. So anyway, I take her hand, we're off the dance floor, and I walk through a few groups of people who I know. They're all going, yeah, go on, yeah. You know, they're chivying me on. And I think, right, okay, you know, what should I do here? You know, I'll just keep holding her hand. So I hold her hand up the steps. We get up onto the second floor landing. I continue to hold her hand. We get to the top, and I look out over the dance floor. I'm still holding her hand, and we don't really exchange any words. And this is getting dicey, because in my head, I feel like such a fucking dipshit for holding her hand in public. I can't think of anything else. I feel like I have just participated in a 20-second walk of shame. That's what I was thinking at the time. I thought to myself, oh my goodness, a whole bunch of people that I know have seen me holding this chick's hand up the stairs. And here I am, completely, out of my depth. And I'm standing on the top floor now, still holding her hand, thinking all of this, thinking about the shame that I have had to partake in. So I decide, right, I need to get out of here. I need to go out the back. I need to go out the back, where the smoking area would be. So I continue to hold her hand, because I don't know what to do now. I just don't know what to do. I feel like a complete dipshit. I feel like I have totally underperformed on the dance floor. Here I am holding her hand like a divvy. So I go out to this back smoking area. I'm still holding her hand. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, right, I've got away from everyone. I'll have a couple of minutes here to sort of collect my thoughts. Try to smooth things over here with the English language. And just before I can start to talk to the gal, I bump into this guy from school. This guy from school who knows me well. And he's sort of standing there with his chick, but he looks a heck of a lot more secure than me. He looks a heck of a lot more comfortable and confident. And he's sort of looking at me and he's going, well, how's things? And I'm mortified. I don't know what to do. And he says, how's things? And I say, yeah, not too bad. It's loud in there, isn't it? And I start trying to make small talk with him. And he's sort of looking at me, and he's looking at my gal, and he can sort of see that my gal's a little uncomfortable. And he's sort of like giving me the eyes, kind of like, yeah, so we leave you to it. Bandido was a dipshit, folks. So anyway, he then moves off. I'm even more mortified now. And so I sit down on these spongy chairs with the gal. And I kid you not, I continue to hold her hand. So as we're moving towards the chairs, these spongy chairs, in the smoking area, out the back on the second floor, I continue to hold her hand. I guide her down onto the chairs. And I continue to hold her hand on the chairs. Folks, this was my one and only experience of holding a chick's hand in public. And it has scarred me for life. I learned so much in that sort of 20-minute stretch. I have to say, you would be amazed how much I learned. I was desperately, I would admit, I was needy, I was desperate, I was totally insecure. I was totally out of my depth, lacking in confidence. I didn't know what to do other than hold this chick's hand. And so what I did was, when I sat on the chairs, remember, I held her way, the walk of shame, up the stairs, onto the landing, out into the back smoking area. And as I sat on the chairs with her, I sat in silence, holding her hand. Because what am I? What am I signaling? I'm so desperate to signal to other people that I, quote, have this under control, that I, quote, am in a relationship, that I, quote, have bagged this chick that I fancy. I was so caught up in signaling to other people that I have this, that all I did was broadcast my neediness, my desperation, and insecurity to the gal in question. Folks, how do you think that relationship went for me? For the 14-year-old Bandido, I spent for a 20-minute stretch in that nightclub. Clubland! That's what it was called. Clubland! I knew it was going to come to me. I just had to keep talking. Clubland. So here I am in Clubland, this nightclub, and I've spent these last 20 minutes fucking holding her hand. Why? Why did I do this? What led to me holding her hand? Why did I even do this? Simple. I was needy, desperate, and insecure. I was trying to signal to the onlooking people that I've got this. Look at me. I've got a chick. I'm out of Clubland. I'm Mr. Cool. I know what I'm doing. And the gal I was with, and she's completely accurate. She actually did the completely right thing. You know what she did? She got up. We sort of talked a little bit. It was, I have to say, very seldom, folks, seldom in my life have I been awkward. I'm not easy. It's not easy to put me in an awkward state. I can talk my way normally out of anything. But this was one of the very few times where I was genuinely awkward. I really was. We talked a little bit on the spongy chairs out in the smoking area. And you know what she did? Here I am holding her hand still. And she sort of loosens the grip. And I could feel her loosening the grip. So I pulled my hand off. And she said, I'm just going to go back inside for a wee bit. I just want to chat with some of my friends. I'll get talking to you later. Rejected! Completely and utterly rejected. Now, she did it in a very nice way. Credit to her. What is she? 13 years of age? I have to say, credit to her. She did it in a way that wasn't publicly humiliating for me. She didn't do it within earshot of other people. It was very nicely delivered. But the signal, folks, that she was sending to me was oh so clear. And the signal was, you don't qualify. You don't qualify. I think I can do better than you. I'm not going to verbalize it in that way. I'm not going to be a cruel person. I'm not going to try and hurt your feelings unnecessarily. I'm not going to try and embarrass you in front of all these people in the nightclub. But that is what the signal was. The signal was, you don't qualify. I think I can do better tonight. And we're going to part ways. Folks, I learned something very valuable in those 20 minutes because it all happened within 20 minutes. And so she went back into the nightclub and I just sat out there in the smoking area. Folks, I hate smoke. I hate being around smokers. But I just sat there. I sat there and went, I didn't throw the toys out of the pram, but I just remember distinctly sitting there and thinking, whoa, there's no teacher quite like real life experience, is there? I had all these ideas about what to do, when you're in a relationship, you talk with people, you have all this theory in your head about how you think it works. And then there's nothing quite like reality. There's nothing quite like a real-time experience that you have to live and go through to actually come to a more informed version, a more informed worldview about, in this case, how man-woman dynamics work. I, as a 14-year-old, totally understood what had happened there. I went back and analysed it. I remember at the time. I remember going home. I remember my parents at the time said, well, I was the night out at Clubland. And I was like, yeah, it was good actually. I wasn't depressed. I wasn't, a fucking wreck at being rejected. And I was rejected publicly. Now she did it in a very nice way. In fact, it was so smooth. But fundamentally, later on in the night, my friends were all like, where is such and such? And I was like, yeah, she's back in the nightclub. And there was an unspoken understanding among us all. It's kind of like, okay, she's back in the nightclub and you're out here. Okay. Everybody understood what had happened. So, again, it was a public rejection. Was I depressed and demoralized? Ready to kill myself? Absolutely not. I remember that night, I sat up that night until probably, I think I got back, 2 or 3 in the morning? I sat up and I thought about it. And I thought, it was unpleasant. There's a certain amount of unpleasantness, of course. You've been rejected. You haven't qualified. You haven't delivered a good service. But when I reflected on it, when my parents said, how was the night out? My response was, good. It was informative, interesting. I think I learned something interesting, actually. And I absolutely did. What was it that I learned? Well, as far back as 14 years of age, what I learned was the act of holding hands in public isn't all that it seems to be, because I lived it. I literally lived it. I was that dude. I was that dude who was needy, desperate, and insecure. And I was trying to convince everybody else in the nightclub, whether it was my friends or other strangers, I was trying to convince everyone that I had a relationship. I had bagged this chick. I knew what I was doing. And what was my default? What was my default? Hold hands. My default was hold hands, because by holding hands, you are signaling to everyone that you've managed to do what was necessary. You're convincing everyone that you've got a girlfriend. But you see, you can fool people. You can fool the onlooking public for a while. But you know who you can't fool? You can't fool your chick. Because, folks, everyone in this life is sending out signals and receiving signals. And that night in Clubland, in the nightclub, that night, yes, was I sending signals out to the onlooking public? Was I deceiving the onlooking public? Because that's exactly what I was doing. I was deceiving the onlookers. I was giving them the illusion that I had pulled this off and that I was in a relationship when I actually wasn't. So, while I may have been able to send out a convincing signal initially, you know who I didn't convince with my signaling? The gal in question. And she's absolutely correct. And you know what? full credit to her. And I do mean this honestly, folks. From her perspective, at 13 years of age, to have the wherewithal to not publicly embarrass me, to not sort of, leave me wedged, from the ceiling, just above the dance floor, with all of my fucking credibility down the toilet. She didn't do that at all. But at the same time, she was absolutely right to dump me. Absolutely right to reject me. Absolutely right to go on about the rest of her night and try to see what she could make of it. No problem. She was absolutely not in the wrong. At all. Her signal reception was working beautifully. Beautifully. And it didn't matter how much I tried to convince other people around that I had this. Ultimately, two things happened. Number one, I couldn't convince her. She, at 13 years of age, interpreted my signals perfectly well. And then number two, it only took about an hour or two later for all of my mates to realise what had happened. So while I may have deceived them for a couple of hours, ultimately, they figured out. The old Bandido didn't pull it off. Such is life. But I learned something very interesting from personal experience. Nothing quite like getting burned personally, folks. And we've all been through it in some variation. That night at Clubland, what I learned was, holy fuck, you see holding hands, that is normally, more often than not, that is a signal of deception to other people. You're trying to convince people that you are someone that you aren't in this relationship. And you may be able to bluff people for a while, folks. You may be able to bluff the onlookers for a while. But as I've said, you know who you won't bluff? The most important person of all. And you know who the most important person of all is? Your chick. And your chick will pick up your neediness, your desperation, and your insecurity. And folks, in case you haven't realized, neediness, desperation, and insecurity, they are not, with a capital N, they are not desirable traits that a woman is looking for in a man. No chick, it doesn't matter whether she's a 13-year-old or a fucking 23-year-old or 33-year-old. No chick wants to be getting into a relationship with a dude who is needy, desperate, and insecure. And the reason why is because those are all symptoms that he doesn't qualify for her right now. And if he doesn't qualify for her right now, by default, that means that she can do better than him. And so as a result, what happens? The Bandido gets the heave-ho, and said gal in question goes out in search of someone who qualifies. She's been given feedback from the market. I've given her feedback. I've given her inputs. She has taken the inputs and she has recalibrated. On the bus journey up to Clubland, I'm pretty sure she had the hots for me. I could be wrong. That would be my assumption. That was the vibe I was getting at the time. I got the vibe that she had romantic feelings for me. She would have been interested in a relationship if I was able to provide, if I was able to hold up my end of the bargain and provide her with evidence that I am the dude that she thinks I could be. So on the bus journey up, it was great. But you see, once the feedback came in, you see, once I started to emit signals of desperation, neediness, insecurity, total turn-off. And it was, folks, it only took 20 minutes. Fuck me. 20 minutes, that's all it took. From the first smooch on the dance floor to me walking up the stairs, onto the second floor landing, out to the smoking area and onto the spongy chairs. This all took place in 20 minutes. She was able to interpret my signals in 20 minutes and arrive at the conclusion that I ought to be dumped. Perfectly accurate conclusion. I'm surprised I made it that far. I have to be honest. But anyway, folks, that is our show. That is our show in its entirety. Men holding their hands or their chick's hand. You know, if you're one of those dudes, you may be the exception. There are always exceptions to the rule. But in my experience, hand holding in public is a red flag. It is a signal that the dude, in this case, because we're talking about dudes here, dudes who want to hold their chick's hand. I'm not talking about chicks who want to hold the man's hand. That's different. I'm specifically talking about men who want to hold their chick's hand. For any men who do this, that is normally, both in my own personal experience and having observed romantic relationships, here, there, and everywhere, that to me is normally a signal of neediness, desperation, and insecurity. We talked earlier in the show that there are two sources of insecurity. Source number one, the man doesn't qualify. That's like me, the Bandido in the nightclub. I didn't qualify. And she went and found, or she at least went out to sample the marketplace then and see if she could find someone else who did qualify. Okay, so that can be one source of insecurity. The man literally doesn't qualify for the chick and he feels anxious about it. He feels like someone else might come along and poach his chick. That's one source of insecurity. The second source of insecurity, the man desperately wants to convince people that he's not gay, basically. He doesn't want to be seen as a single man. He doesn't want other onlooking people to see him as being single for too long a period of time. So he's willing to literally get into a relationship with a minger so that other people can see him in a relationship with something that resembles a woman. And as soon as people see him in a relationship, even with a minger, that then starts to, get rid of the notion that he's gay. And we know gay people do this all the time anyway, folks. We know that gay men oftentimes get into relationships with women and even have fucking kids with them and a family to hide the fact that they're gay. So, this is a very real-time inference that can be made by people. And so, a second reason why men will desperately hold on to their chick's hand because of their insecurity is because the man wants to be seen in a relationship. Because if he's seen out of a relationship and single for too long, people will start to create rumours about certain things with respect to his sexuality. Because if you're not seeing a dude in a whole bunch of relationships, then the inference that people can make is, well, maybe he's not interested in chicks, and maybe he's hiding something. So anyway, that is our show, folks. Let me see if we got anybody in the live chat. Nobody in the live chat. Folks, if you make it to the end of the show, let me know down in the comments. What do you think? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Leave your insights down there. Again, feel free to give the show a thumbs up. If you found it interesting what we were talking about, folks, let me know. Feedback from the marketplace. And then finally, folks, if you like in general what we do here at Bandido Talks, then feel free to subscribe. Here on YouTube, folks, we are live every week, Universal Bandido time, the Bandido. He does his live shows as and when he feels like it. You're going to have to subscribe to get notified of upcoming live shows and also to get notified of any new uploads. So feel free to subscribe to Bandido Talks here on YouTube. Also, folks, this scrolling black banner, you will see right below that there is a link over to Rumble because Bandido Talks is also live over on Rumble. We do live shows over on Rumble, completely different to the live shows that we do here. Brand new live content. We tend to do more political stories, more US-based stories. So if you want more US-based content, more political content, use that scrolling black banner. It'll come back around again. You'll see it circulating throughout the episode on that scrolling black banner. Head over to Rumble for more political commentary and stuff like that. And subscribe over on Rumble. Finally, folks, you can also follow over on X. That's the other platform where we're sort of active on. Again, scrolling black banner. Where is it? I always get confused on the monitor. Right here. Follow over on X. And again, we can notify you of any upcoming live shows, let you know of any uploads in general, what we're doing with the show. Follow over on X. Folks, that is everything from me. It's getting pretty sunny out here. I'm sweaty as fuck, but I wouldn't want to have it any other way. So folks, with all of that said, I hope you enjoy your incoming weekend. I'm going to enjoy mine. It's time to bask in the sun, folks. Eat some food. Watermelon is calling me. And with all of that said, folks, it is over and out. This week on YouTube, live from the Bandido.